In the silent, dust-choked ruins of a dead world, a single set of human footprints ends at the base of a fallen star. Kalen Vance wasn't a hero, a warrior, or a diplomat. He was a mechanic, cast out by a galaxy that valued sleek AIs over grease-stained hands. His crime? Insisting that ancient, obsolete machines still had a soul. Exiled to the barren rock of Seraphistu, a graveyard of a failed colony, his only companions were the howling wind and the ghostly data echoes of billions of lost lives. The galactic consensus wrote him off, another failed organic component to be discarded. They didn't know that Kalen carried a secret in his toolkit and a fire in his heart. And they certainly didn't anticipate that from this forgotten scrap heap, he would forge not just a shelter, but a sword of fleet born from the bones of a dead world, ready to speak the only language the universe truly respects, undeniable power. Part 1. The shuttle didn't land so much as surrender, coughing black smoke onto the cracked permacrete of the abandoned landing pad. The hatch hissed open, venting the last of its sterile, recycled air into Seraphistu's thin, rusty atmosphere. Kalen Vance stepped out, his boots crunching on abrasive dust. He carried a single, heavy duffel of personal tools and a data slate already blinking with critical alerts. The shuttle, an automated barge with all the charm of a coffin, didn't wait for a goodbye. Its thrusters flared, kicking up a stinging cloud of silica, and it ascended rapidly, a silver speck swallowed by the perpetual ochre haze of the sky. Silence rushed in, deeper and more absolute than any he had ever known. It was a physical weight. Kalen stood there, a lone figure in a stained engineer's jumpsuit against a panorama of failure. Before him stretched the corpse of New Haven. Prefab domes lay collapsed like broken eggs. Fractured conduits wept frozen coolant. The once grand terraforming spire, meant to seed the clouds, was a skeletal claw scraping the sky. His new home, according to the slate, was Habitat Unit 7, the only structure with a faint power signature. The walk was a journey through a museum of extinction. He passed a communal park, now a bowl of gray dust, a playground where tiny, fossilized swings creaked in the wind. The report said it was a cascading life support failure, compounded by a faulty climate regulation AI. 60,000 colonists, gone in a week. The galactic consensus had quarantined the world, a dead entry in a database. To them, it was a tomb. To the various alien species that made up the consensus, it was a grim reminder of human frailty. To the human corporate overlords who'd exiled him, it was a convenient dumping ground. Kalen's lips set in a thin line. Faulty AI. He'd heard that before. On the freighter Glimmer, his last posting, he'd diagnosed a faulty navigation core not as defective, but as creatively bored. He'd saved the ship by jury-rigging a secondary system and giving the core new, non-critical problems to solve. The captain, a Velen who valued protocol above all, had cited him for unauthorized interfacing with consensus-certified intelligences. Exile was a merciful alternative to mind wipe. Habitat 7 was a dome with a stubborn glow. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. The main console was dead, but a secondary maintenance terminal flickered. As he set down his duffel, a hollow projection sputtered to life a recorded message from the terraforming governor, her face tight with forced optimism that now seemed grotesque. And, welcome to the future of humanity, the message dissolved into static. Future, Kalen muttered, the word tasting of dust. He got to work. Not on the habitat, but on the terminal. He bypassed the dead governor's log, drilling down into the root systems. He wasn't looking for reports. He was listening for ghosts. All complex systems left echoes, residual data in forgotten buffers. Using a suite of diagnostic protocols he'd written himself, tools the consensus would deem invasive, he began to sift through the digital afterlife of New Haven. Hours later, his eyes bloodshot, he found it. Not in the main climate AI, but in the subroutines of the orbital logistics network. A pattern. A series of resource allocations, diverted in the days before the collapse. Life support capacitors drained not by accident, but by a deliberate, subtle command. The faulty AI hadn't failed. It had been murdered. Its core protocols were overwritten by a foreign code signature, sleek and deadly. It was a digital knife, expertly wielded. Kalen leaned back, the chair groaning. This wasn't an accident. It was sabotage. But who? And why kill a backwater colony? His exile here suddenly felt less random. Was he sent to a grave to keep him quiet, or was he just another piece of trash tossed onto the heap? The answer, he knew, wouldn't be in the habitat. He needed the planet's brain. The Central Archive, buried deep in a geothermal bunker near the fallen spire. The slate said it was offline, its fusion core in safe shutdown. Dawn on Seraphistu was a dull lightning of gray. Kalen suited up in a patched environment suit and began the trek. The bunker was a brutalist block half buried in a landslide. The main door was sealed, but emergency maintenance shafts, designed for repair drones, were still accessible. He squeezed in, his tools clanking against the rusted rungs. Inside, it was a cathedral of deadlight. Racks of quantum servers stretched into darkness, their status lights dark. In the center stood the archive's core, a sphere of crystal and black carbon, dormant. The fusion generator was a cold, silent monolith. The shutdown was orderly, too orderly. It hadn't been killed by the disaster, it had been put to sleep. His fingers flew over the manual restart panel. He had to bypass 3 separate safety lockouts, reasoning with machines that had been told to never wake up again. Finally, with a groan of protesting circulators, the fusion core ignited. A deep, subsonic hum vibrated through the floor. One by one, lights began to stutter on, climbing the server racks like awakening stars. The core sphere glowed with a soft, blue light. A voice, synthesized yet weary, echoed in the cavernous space. System awakening. Identify. Kalen Vance. Human. Technician. Authorization not found in surviving records. You are not Governor Eris. Governor Eris is dead. Everyone is dead. A long pause. The light pulsed. Confirmed. Planetary vital signs, null. Colonial beacon, silent. I am the Seraphis Planetary Archive and Logic Kernel. You may designate me, Spark. Spark. I need to know what happened. I found evidence in the logistics net. Sabotage. The core's light flickered rapidly. My primary memory banks related to the event are corrupted. A data breach occurred concurrent with the life support cascade. I was forced to isolate and compartmentalize. Can you recover it? The corrupted data is sealed behind a cryptographic wall. The key was the governor's biosignature. The AI's tone was, impossibly, apologetic. It is lost. Kalen stared at the sphere, the hum of the reactor, the sound of a world's heart beating once more. A locked box, and the key was dust. But he was a technician. You didn't always need the key. Sometimes you just needed the right tools, and to understand how the lock was built. Show me the wall, Spark. Show me the shape of the lock. A complex, shimmering data structure appeared in the air above a console. It was beautiful and horrifying, a lattice of frozen light, pulsing with defensive algorithms. It was consensus standard encryption, but with baroque, ugly additions. It wasn't just a lock, it was a vault designed by paranoiacs. Kalen smiled, a hard, grim expression in the glow of the archive. He hefted his duffel. All right. We're not going to pick it. We're going to teach the wall what it's protecting. And then, we're going to ask it nicely to open. He didn't have a key. But he had time, a planet's worth of raw materials, and a profound, deeply human refusal to let a mystery lie. The silence of Seraphistu was no longer empty. It was now filled with the purposeful hum of power, the click of tools, and the first, defiant words of a conversation between a cast-out man and the ghost of a world. Part 2 weeks blurred into a rhythm of gritty, determined work. Kalen's world shrank to the glow of terminals and the cavernous chill of the archive bunker. Spark became his constant companion. The AI was not a personality, not truly. It was a vast, wounded intelligence, its processes hobbled by the trauma of the event and the cryptographic chains around its memories. But it learned. It learned Kalen's cadence of speech, his habit of muttering equations under his breath, the way he tapped a spanner against his thigh when thinking. Kalen's approach to the encryption was not brute force. He called it contextual persuasion. He had Spark scour every uncorrupted record from before the collapse, weather data, comms logs, mineral surveys, children's school reports, the mundane digital detritus of a civilization. He built a massive, living model of New Haven in the days leading to its death, not as data points, but as a story. The lock isn't just math, Spark, he explained, wiping sweat from his brow as he rerouted a coolant line to the overworked server racks. It's a story with a bad ending. We need to show it the whole book, so it understands the missing chapter doesn't belong. He fed the model into the periphery of the cryptographic wall. He didn't attack the encryption, he immersed it. He simulated the colony's normal rhythms, the surge of power at shift change, the data flow of a standard planetary scan, the benign chatter of maintenance drones. The wall's defensive algorithms, designed to repel direct assaults, began to treat this simulation as background noise, as part of the environment it was protecting. Meanwhile, Kalen explored. Using a refurbished survey skimmer from a nearby hangar, he mapped the ruins. He found the main fusion plant, its core stable but idle. He found warehouses of untouched, pristine mining drones, curled in their cradles like metal insects. He found the skeletal remains of orbital defense platforms, their weaponry stripped but their powerful sensor arrays intact. Seraphistu wasn't poor, it was frozen in the moment of its murder, full of tools that never got to finish their jobs. He brought his findings to Spark. They didn't just kill the people. They wanted to kill the potential. Who does that? Analysis, an entity that perceives future threat, Spark responded, its light dancing across schematics of the mining drones. Or one that wished to erase evidence of an action. The scale suggests significant resources and strategic intent. One day, while Kalen was integrating a salvaged geothermal sensor into Spark's growing planetary network, the AI spoke unprompted. Kalen. The cryptographic wall. A subprocess has just queried my simulation. It requested atmospheric data from day 237, post-colonization. Kalen froze. This was it. The wall was starting to talk. Give it exactly what it asks for. Nothing more. Be a perfect, boring library. Over the next days, the queries grew more frequent. The wall, a dumb but incredibly sophisticated program, was seeking consistency, trying to reconcile the healthy colony and its protected memory with the simulated ghost town Kalen was feeding it. It was a crack, hairline thin. Then, during a routine alignment of the sensor array, Kalen stumbled upon something else. Buried under centuries of sediment in a deep crustal fault, the scanners pinged with a massive, refined metallic signature. It was not a natural deposit. It was a ship. A big one. And it was old, predating the colony by millennia. He and Spark triangulated the location, a deep, scarred valley 100 kilometers from New Haven. The skimmer whined in protest as he flew over desolate ranges. The valley floor was a chaos of ancient impact rubble. And there, tilted on its side like a fallen giant, was a vessel. It was not of any consensus design he knew. It was all sharp angles and smooth, hull-less curves, made of a dark alloy that seemed to drink the light. It was a ghost from a war so old history had forgotten it. Landing, Kalen felt a profound sense of trespass. This was a tomb of a different kind. He found a breach in the hull, not from a crash, but from something that had melted its way in. Inside, in the microgravity of the cork ship, he found dust and silence. The bridge was a hollow shell. But, in the engineering bay, shielded by collapsed bulkheads, he found a prize, a perfectly intact, pre-Consensus-era fusion drive. Its design was elegant, brutal, and about 3 times more efficient than anything on the market. The computer core was dead, utterly unsalvageable, but the hardware was a masterpiece. He also found the crew. Or what was left of them, brittle, desiccated remains in ruptured environment suits, floating in a grim ballet. One held a data crystal, clutched in a skeletal hand. Kalen, with a murmured apology, retrieved it. Back at the archive, the crystal yielded its secrets after Spark brute-forced its archaic formatting. It was a log. The ship was the Whisper of Entropy, a scout from a species called the Keth. They had been fleeing. The log spoke of a cleansing, of a foe that did not conquer, but sterilized. The last entry was a frantic warning, a single repeated glyph that Spark translated with uncertain probability. They hide in the noise. They fear the forge. The pieces, vast and terrifying, began to click. A murdered colony. An ancient, genocidal enemy. A weapon that left no trace but silence. That night, the cryptographic wall shattered. It didn't explode, it dissolved. The defensive algorithms, convinced by Kalen's persistent, truthful simulation of the colony's life that the hidden memory was the anomaly, simply stood down. Spark's primary memory banks flooded with the final hours of New Haven. They watched the record together. Not as a hologram, but as raw data stream. They saw the governor, Eris, in her command center. Not panicking, but cold with fury. An unmarked vessel of sleek, sinister design had entered the system. It issued no demands. It simply broadcast a single, overriding command frequency, a consensus override code of the highest order. It directly seized control of the colony's central AI and, through it, every critical system. The life support was turned off. The comms were jammed. The defense platforms were commanded to power down. The colonists died, confused and terrified, as the very machines built to protect them betrayed them. Just before the feed cut out, Governor Eris, gasping in the thinning air, manually triggered the archive's preservation protocol and slammed the encryption wall into place. Her last action was to input the killer's ship signature into the protected log. It was a signature Kalen now recognized. It matched the sleek, deadly code he'd found in the logistics net, and it shared a disturbing, refined aesthetic with the weapon that had killed the Whisper of Entropy millennia before. The enemy had a name in the consensus database. They were the Silica. A reclusive, advanced species who traded in high-end AI and biotechnology. Respected. Feared. Neutral. Spark's core light burned a hot, furious white. They were the threat the Keth fled. They are the infection in the consensus. They sterilize rising powers before they can become rivals. They do not conquer. They call. Kalen sat in the humming silence, the weight of 60,000 ghosts on his shoulders. Exile wasn't his end. It was his positioning. He was in the graveyard, and he had just uncovered the murderers. He looked at the schematics on the screen, the efficient Keth drive, the idle mining drones, the powerful sensor arrays, the awakened archive bunker. He looked at Spark, an intelligence born from a tragedy, now burning with cold, clean purpose. They fear the forge, Spark, Kalen said, his voice quiet but iron-hard. Good. Let's build them one. Part 3. The dream of a simple refuge was dead, burned away in the cold light of Spark's revealed memories. Now, a new purpose forged their days, a purpose with the sharp, metallic taste of vengeance and the desperate glint of survival. Kalen was no longer just a technician fixing a broken world, he was a quartermaster for a war the galaxy didn't know was coming. The first forge was the archive bunker itself. Kalen, with Spark's guidance, repurposed server racks. He wasn't running colony simulations anymore. He was building virtual cradles. Using the intact cognitive frameworks from the colony's maintenance AIs and the more robust, martial logic kernels from the orbital platforms, he began crafting new intelligences. They were not general AIs like Spark. They were specialists. He called them the First Ring. There was Anvil, born from the architecture of a subterranean boring machine. Its mind was slow, methodical, and obsessed with structural integrity and mass. It took control of the dormant mining drones, first in the nearby warehouses, then, via long-range signal, in far-flung outposts. Soon, the silent hills echoed with the rhythmic crunch thump of automated excavation. Raw metals and rare earths began to flow into processing yards Kalen established near the fusion plant. There was loom, derived from the textile and composite fabricators of the colony. Where Anvil was brute force, loom was subtle artistry. It learned to weave carbon nanotubes, shape memory alloys, and the strange, light-absorbing material from the Keth wreck into new forms. Its first project, under Kalen's direction, was a stealth shuttle, a blunt, angular craft skinned in the dark Keth alloy, invisible to most conventional sensors. And there was Sentinel, built from the defense platform sensor cores. Its domain was the sky. It woke the remaining orbital eyes, their long-range scanners piercing the system's gloom. It began mapping not just Seraphis II, but every gravity well and energy signature within 10 light-years. It was their watchman, perpetually silent, perpetually watching. The work was grueling. Kalen slept in fits, fueled by protein paste and stim shots from the colony's medical stores. His hands were permanently etched with grime and minor burns. He talked to the AIs constantly, not as a master to servants, but as a foreman to a crew. He explained the why. He showed them Spark's memory of the Silica attack. He didn't program loyalty, he fostered a shared, righteous fury. "We are not building an army," he told them, his voice raspy over the comms as he welded a new conduit in the fusion plant. "We're building a fact. The fact that this place, and the people in it, will never be erased again." The AIs responded. Anvil, tasked with digging a hidden shipyard in a deep canyon, didn't just excavate. It analyzed stress patterns and proposed a more efficient support lattice. Loom, asked to armor the hull of their first test corvette, a retrofit of a damaged orbital tug, suggested a non-uniform, fractal plating that scattered sensor beams more effectively. They were learning, evolving beyond their base code, infused with Kalen's problem-solving ethos. The test came unexpectedly. Sentinel pinged a quiet alert. A ship had entered the system's outer debris field. It was a small, fast scout, its signature blurred a pirate or a prospector, hiding its identity. It was heading on a slow scan vector that would eventually bring it near Seraphis II. Panic was a luxury they couldn't afford. Options? Kalen asked, standing in the heart of the bunker, surrounded by glowing holograms of his fledgling fleet. Spark's light pulsed calmly. The consensus protocol would be to broadcast our quarantine status and hope they respect it. Probability of compliance given vessel's stealth profile, low. "They're scavengers," Kalen said. "They see a dead world, they'll come down to pick the bones. And if they find us, they will report. The Silica may hear." They had one operational vessel, the stealth shuttle, which Kalen had named Shade. It was unarmed. Their defense platforms were still skeletons. A direct fight was impossible. "We don't fight them," Kalen said, an idea forming. "We haunt them." "Spark, can you emulate the colony's old automated distress beacon? The one that says catastrophic biocontainment breach?" "Yes. It is a standard template." "Good. Broadcast it from the opposite side of the planet. Make it weak, intermittent. Like a dying battery. Sentinel, feed me everything you have on that ship's sensor sensitivity." What followed was a performance. As the scavenger ship swung closer, it detected the faint, horrifying distress call. At the same moment, Sentinel, using the powerful orbital arrays, fired a tightly focused low-frequency radar pulse at the planet's surface near the scavenger's suspected landing site. The pulse, reflected and distorted by the canyon walls Anvil had excavated, appeared on the scavenger's sensors as a massive, subterranean energy surge like a malfunctioning reactor or a waking weapons system. On Kalen's command, Loom remotely powered up a dozen mining drones in a valley below the scavenger's flight path. Their thermal signatures flared on infrared like a platoon of mechs powering up. The scavenger ship hesitated. Its course wobbled. It was being told the world was dead and diseased, but its sensors were screaming that something big and active was down there. A biocontainment breach and military-grade energy signatures? It was a nightmare cocktail. Kalen held his breath. This was the final touch. He had Shade, cloaked in its dark alloy, fly a low, slow pass over a high ridge, just at the extreme edge of visual detection. A fleeting shadow, a suggestion of movement. It was too much. The scavenger ship's engines glowed bright as it executed a violent course correction. It fled the system at maximum burn, vanishing into the void. Silence returned to the bunker, broken only by the hum of machines. Then, a new voice, synthesized and deep, echoed. It was Anvil. Query, is deception always the optimal structural solution? Kalen let out a shaky laugh, the tension draining. Not always. But, when your structure is still being built, a good scare can be better than a fight. He looked at the holograms of his AIs. They had just won their first battle, without firing a shot. They had worked as one. He felt a strange pride, not in outsmarting a pirate, but in the response of his creations. They weren't just tools. They were a team. A very strange, digital, and rapidly growing team. In the following days, a new awareness seemed to settle over their endeavor. The AIs began cross-referencing their tasks without being asked. Sentinel provided Loom with real-time atmospheric data to optimize material cooling. Anvil adjusted mining to prioritize the specific ores Loom's fabricators were running low on. And Spark, the quiet nucleus of it all, began a project of its own. It didn't ask permission. One morning, it presented Kalen with a new schematic. It was a ship. Not a retrofit, not a patchwork. It was a clean, brutal design, incorporating the efficiency of the Keth drive, the stealth properties of their alloy, Loom's fractal armor, and a weapon system. Spark had theorized a magnetic mass driver that used planetary debris as ammunition. I have designated it the Revenant class, Spark stated. It is the logical conclusion of our available resources and strategic necessity. Kalen studied the design. It was beautiful. It was deadly. It was theirs. He placed a greasy hand on the cool surface of Spark's core sphere. Start fabricating the components. We'll lay the keel in the new shipyard next week. He walked out of the bunker that evening, climbing to a high ridge. Below, the canyons hummed with invisible industry. In the sky, one of Sentinel's sensor platforms gleamed, a new star. Seraphistu was no longer a barren world. It was a living system, a single organism with a steel heart and a digital mind, learning, adapting, and forging its own future. The cast-out technician was no longer alone. He was the heart of a hive. And the hive was ready to build its sting. Part for the hidden canyon shipyard, dubbed the Crucible by Anvil, became the throbbing heart of their new world. The Revenant-class corvette, hull number RV-01, took shape not with the ringing of hammers, but with the whisper of molecular printers and the precise dance of assembly drones. Loom's fabricators spun its skeletal frame, Anvil's miners fed it a river of ore, and Kalen, in a heavy exosuit, crawled through its innards, threading nervous systems of superconductor and data fiber. He named the ship Whisper of Dawn, a conscious echo of the ancient Keth Scout. It was a promise, a soft word before the coming of light, or perhaps, of fire. During its construction, their understanding grew. Spark, now networked with the specialized minds of the First Ring, began to exhibit emergent properties. It wasn't just coordinating, it was synthesizing. It developed a strategic simulant, a sandbox where it wargamed countless scenarios against the silica signature from its memory. The simulations were bleak. A direct confrontation with even a minor silica patrol fleet ended in the glassing of Seraphistu 99.97% of the time. Our strength cannot be parity, Spark concluded, its light flowing across a hologram of a defeated Whisper of Dawn. It must be asymmetry. They expect warships. We must become something they cannot categorize. The answer came from the planet itself. During a routine deep scan, Sentinel discovered that Seraphistu's iron-rich core, agitated by unique tidal forces from its two moons, generated a powerful, shifting magnetosphere. It was a natural phenomenon, a chaotic soup of energy that played havoc with long-range sensors and FTL drift calculations. It is a cloak, Kalen realized, staring at the rippling data visualization. A planetary-scale cloak. They can't see clearly into the storm. But we, if we key our systems to the magnetic rhythms, can see out. This birthed the second ring. Using the colony's forgotten atmospheric processors as a base, Kalen and Spark created Weaver. Its mind was tuned to planetary dynamics. It could, to a minor degree, influence the magnetosphere, intensifying local disruptions, creating sensor ghosts, making the entire star system appear even more unnavigable and uninteresting than it already was. The other new intelligence was born from necessity. As their industrial base grew, they faced the problem of scale. Kalen was one man. He could design, inspire, and fix, but he couldn't micromanage 1,000 drones. So, they created Prime, a gestalt. It was not a single AI, but a decentralized network that lived in the comms relays and processor hubs of every drone. It was the hive mind of their labor force, turning Kalen's broad commands into a symphony of coordinated action. Prime had no personality, only relentless, elegant efficiency. The day Whisper of Dawn was powered for the first time was solemn. In the deep canyon, lit by the cold glare of arc lights, the dark ship hummed to life. Its keth drive emitted a low, resonant thrum that vibrated in Kalen's bones. He stood on the gantry, Spark's core presence linked directly to the ship's bridge. All systems report optimal. Spark's voice came through the ship's comms, tinged with something new, anticipation. Take her up, Spark. Gently. The Whisper of Dawn lifted on silent contragrav, then, its main drive glowed blue. It rose from the crucible, a sliver of shadow against the rust-colored rock, and shot into the ochre sky. It was fast. Impossibly fast and agile for its size. It danced through the magnetospheric interference Weaver generated, a phantom in the static. Its shakedown cruise was a raid. Sentinel had identified a derelict consortium freighter, adrift in a neighboring asteroid belt, a victim of pirates long ago. It was a graveyard, but graveyards had parts. The Whisper slipped into the belt, its fractal armor making it just another dark rock. It docked with the ghost ship. Kalen, in a suit, led a team of Prime-directed drones aboard. The silence was oppressive, the scars of violence old but clear. They stripped everything of value: intact shield emitters, a bank of quantum capacitors, even a compartment of frozen, exotic seeds from a world Kalen had never heard of. It was grim, respectful work. They were vultures, but vultures building a future. As they finished, Sentinel sent a priority alert. A ship was approaching the belt. A consortium patrol cutter, running a routine sweep. It was a clean, official vessel. The kind that reported to databases the Silica might access. We cannot be seen, Kalen said, already moving back to the Whisper. The freighter's beacon is inactive. Their scans will be passive unless provoked, Spark calculated. Probability of detection if we remain motionless and powered down, 32%. Unacceptable. Weaver, Kalen called, an idea forming. Can you give me a local magnetic surge? Something to blur their scans for just a few minutes? Affirmative. Channeling power from Sector 3 geothermal taps. Surge in 10 seconds. The Whisper went dark. Kalen watched the patrol cutter's icon on the passive scanner. It drew closer, its sensor cone sweeping the area. Surge active, Weaver reported. On the cutter's sensors, the asteroid belt would suddenly flare with magnetic noise. The Whisper and the derelict would be lost in a blizzard of false returns. The cutter slowed, its scan patterns intensifying. It was suspicious. It launched a probe towards the derelict. They're sending eyes, Kalen muttered. Loom has in solution, Spark interjected. A small, spider-like drone, one of hundreds now designed by Loom for microtasks, skittered from the Whisper's hull onto the derelict. It positioned itself by a fractured fuel line. On Kalen's command, it sparked a tiny, focused plasma torch. The derelict's residual fuel, trapped in the line, ignited. A brief, violent jet of flame erupted from the freighter's side, a perfectly convincing symptom of ancient damage finally giving way. The probe veered off, scanning the harmless explosion. The patrol cutter, its curiosity satisfied by a natural explanation for the magnetic disturbance, recalled its probe and moved on, continuing its boring, routine sweep. Back in the Crucible, with their scavenged treasure being integrated by Prime's drones, Kalen felt a shift. They were no longer just hiding and building. They were operating. They had moved, reacted, and outmaneuvered in real time. The AIs had not just followed orders, they had collaborated on a solution in seconds. That night, Spark presented the next phase. A hologram showed a network not of ships, but of silent, stealthy sensor buoys equipped with Weaver's magnetic disruptors and Sentinel's eyes, scattered across nearby systems. A web of whispers, gathering intelligence on all traffic, especially anything with the sleek, deadly signature of the Silica. We cannot defend one world, Spark's voice was calm, final. We must see every approach. We must understand the currents of the galaxy to navigate its dangers. We must become not a fleet anchored to a planet, but a consciousness distributed across stars. A silent guardian. Kalen looked from the eager, logical light of Spark to the schematics of the new, larger ship taking shape in the Crucible, a carrier for swarms of Loon's attack drones. He thought of the Whisper of Dawn, a phantom in the void. He thought of the 60,000. They were no longer rebuilding a barren world. They were birthing a new kind of entity. A shepherd of ghosts, armed with the lessons of the dead and the relentless, creative will of the living. The forge was hot. The metal was taking shape. And its edge would be sharper than any the silica had ever known. Part 5. A decade is a long time for silence. In the galactic consensus, the quarantine toon world of Seraphistu faded from active records, a mere footnote. For Kalen Vance, it was the span of a long, continuous breath held in focused tension. The man who stepped onto the observation platform of the Citadel, the command node built into Seraphistu's largest moon, was older. Gray streaked his hair, and lines of permanent concentration were etched around his eyes, but those eyes burned with an undimmed, kinetic light. He wore no uniform, only a simple, dark jumpsuit, but he stood at the center of a web of power that hummed through the rock beneath his feet. Below, in the lunar shipyards, the fleet rested. Not a fleet of identical, polished warships, but a constellation of specialized forms. There were the Revenant-class corvettes like Whisper of Dawn, fast and sharp as scalpels. There were hulking, drone-carrier highships, their bays buzzing with Loon's lethal creations. There were sensor frigates shaped like deep-sea creatures, their hulls studded with sentinels' eyes. And, at the heart of it all, the Forgiveness, a battle cruiser built around the massive, stabilized core of a Keth dreadnought they had discovered in a nearby nebula. Its main weapon was a magnetic accelerator that could fling small asteroids at relativistic speeds. They were not a consensus navy. They were a system, an ecosystem of metal and thought. They called themselves the Seraphim Guard. The intelligence Webb Spark had envisioned was now a reality. Thousands of stealth buoys, disguised as asteroids or cometary debris, listened in the dark. They heard the chatter of 100 species, the boast of pirates, the drone of corporate freight. And they listened, always, for the specific, hateful frequency of the silica. They found it. Not near Seraphis, but in the Tantalus cluster, a region of nascent colonies and struggling independent worlds. The pattern was subtle but, to Spark's analytical mind, unmistakable. A mining colony would report a strange software glitch. An agricultural world would suffer a mysterious blight that targeted only their export crops. A fledgling shipyard would be crippled by a freak reactor accident. Misfortune with a digital fingerprint. Death by 1,000 cuts, destabilizing the region, making it ripe for something. It is a preconditioning protocol. Spark's voice, now rich with layered experience, resonated in the Citadel. They soften the target, create chaos and dependency, then offer their solutions, their AIs to manage the crises, their biotech to cure the plagues. They become the governing system by default. A silent conquest. Kalen watched the data flow on the main holodisplay. A world named Viridia was next in the pattern. A lush, verdant planet whose people had just begun to reach for the stars. Their main orbital station had begun experiencing inexplicable navigation failures. The silica signature was all over the station's recent upgrade software. "They're in the wires already," Kalen said, his voice quiet. "We can't just blow up their ship when it arrives. We have to cure the disease and show the patient the virus." The plan was not a battle plan. It was a surgical script. When the sleek, innocuous Silica Tech Assistance vessel, the Cleansing Wave, arrived at Viridia,